From the capital city of Charleston, West Virginia, this is Inside West Virginia Politics with Rick Johnson. Inside West Virginia Politics is brought to you by AARP West Virginia, your ally for real possibilities in the Mountain State, and by Williamson Health and Wellness Center, working to open doors to broader health care in southern West Virginia and eastern Kentucky. Now, Inside West Virginia Politics.
Welcome to Inside West Virginia Politics. I'm Rick Johnson. A circuit judge in Kanawha County ruled that the West Virginia Water Development Authority was in violation of the state's constitution when it awarded a $5 million grant to an out-of-state Catholic institution. Joining us to talk about it is Billy Wolf, who is Communications Director of the ACLU West Virginia. Welcome to Inside West Virginia Politics.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's good to have you here. Your organization brought a lawsuit earlier this year on behalf of the American Humanist Association. What was the purpose of the lawsuit?
Well, this lawsuit was about whether the state can use public funding to directly support a religious ministry or religious advocacy. Our legal team, and I want to say from the jump that I'm not personally an attorney, but our legal team's position was that the Constitution is very clear here and that you cannot use public funds for that purpose. And so, as you said, we had a ruling this past week stating that this grant from the Development Authority to an out-of-state religious institution was unconstitutional.
This was in Kanawha County Circuit Court. I believe Judge Lindsay was proceeding with this, and he did say that the West Virginia Constitution does prohibit the use of public funds for religious education and advocacy. The institution involved in this is in Steubenville, Ohio. What's the name of it?
This is College of St. Joseph the Worker.
And what was it they were wanting to do with sort of expanding into West Virginia?
Well, first I want to say that we have absolutely nothing against this institution. Religious institutions have every right to exist and to educate their students as they see fit according to their religious beliefs. We simply think that the use of this public funding for this purpose was inappropriate. And the reason that it was inappropriate is, so we've received some pushback that has said, look, they want to bring a trade school into West Virginia, and that's economic development. But the problem here is that in order to access that, in order to access the trades training, you have to also receive a degree in Catholic studies because that is the only degree that the institution can confer.
So that sort of triggers that church and state.
Yes, we consider this a big win for the separation of church and state.
So in order to access the school's trade education program, again, I want to make sure everybody understands, students must receive a degree in Catholic studies before the institution can grant the degree.
Right, that is the only degree that the institution confers.
And so that would be part of what comes to West Virginia.
That's right.
Tell us about the Water Authority. How long do they have to respond to the order from the judge?
So in addition to saying that this was unconstitutional, the judge has given the other side 30 days to come back and show how they intend to honor their constitutional obligations. So right now, we're getting some questions like, what does this mean? What does it mean for the money? We simply don't know. We're kind of in a wait and see period right now.
What are you hearing back from the public on this decision by the Kanawha County Circuit Court?
Well, I think this is really one of the most popular things that we've done in my time at the ACLU of West Virginia. We've heard from people, emails, phone calls, messages on social media saying, thank you for doing this. And I think that's because, we have tens of thousands of people in West Virginia who lack access to clean water. And these are communities that hear year after year, we're sorry, there's no assistance available for you. And then they look at the news and they see over $5 million going out of state for this purpose and feel it's really egregious. So we've heard a lot of support from people, including people who say things like, I don't normally agree with you guys on much, but thank you for doing this.
And in the end, what would you say is the takeaway from this decision?
The takeaway from this decision is, well, I first want to emphasize it's not always wrong for public funding to go to a faith-based organization in some way or another. The specifics of this case are what matters, that public funding was going to go directly toward a religious mission and religious advocacy.
And do you maybe anticipate an appeal?
Well, again, an appeal would come after sort of this 30-day period, if at all. So we just kind of have to wait and see where things are headed.
And what's the web address for the ACLU West Virginia, for one who might want to know more?
That's acluwv.org.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it very much, Billy.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you
to
so
have
much.
you. We'll take a break and be right back with more of Inside West Virginia Politics. Welcome back. If you live in West Virginia, you've probably experienced a flash flood or know someone who has, but nothing like the horrific flooding in Texas on July 4th weekend. C.W. Sigmund, Kanawha County Emergency Management Director, joins us now to talk about what's been going on in Texas. C.W., welcome to Inside West Virginia Politics.
Glad to be here, sir.
You know, we've all seen a lot of the video coming from Texas and the horrific, monstrous flooding that took place there. In your years of experience, and that's a vast stretch.
A few years, yes, sir.
Of experience, how would you describe what you've seen about the flooding in Texas?
I can't describe it. I've been to a lot of bad floods, from the floods in '77 in the southern part of the state to the 16 floods on the Elk River. Nothing compares to what I'm seeing in Texas. The amount, the speed the river rose, the amount of damage and the loss of life is just unbelievable. I'm glad I don't have to endure that.
You know, what I noticed in some of the video we've seen coming back is the sheer force of this wave after wave of water that was just blowing down anything in front of it, including cabins with people inside. There was one video with a cabin floating down the river with people still in it, and it was nighttime. You could see them in there with flashlights on. It was just incredible.
And to see a wave, usually when water comes up, it doesn't have a wave with it. It's not like a tidal wave. It just, the water starts rising real fast. I've never seen a wave like that just from rain.
Yeah. So, and the water now has receded, it seems, and it's just a horrific situation there in that part of Texas. We in West Virginia, we've had, as you outlined, many floods in our lifetime here in the state of West Virginia. It could be a creek flood. It could be something like the 2016 flood that took life as well. How are we preparing ourselves to do better, to keep ourselves safer in flooding situations?
I think one of our issues we have is a lot of homes are still sitting in the floodplain, in an area that you have a 1% chance, annual chance of it going to the 100-year flood mark, and your house could be flooded. And we have a lot of houses that sit in what's called the floodway, that area that's supposed to be reserved for the water to drain out during a rain event. So we have a lot of vulnerabilities. But one of our strengths is we have good communications here. And I use an example, the TV stations and the radio stations are great here about getting the message out. Well, last week we had some heavy rain and had a flash flood warning. I had my FM radio on in the car, and I heard the alerts coming across, and the weather service on the FM radio, regular commercial FM radio, telling people there was a flash flood warning and where it was in Kanawha County. So we have that information. If we're going to have a flood event, you hear for days beforehand. Spencer will get out there and tell everybody how bad it's going to be. We'll pay attention to that. So in every area in the county will be able to hear an AM, FM radio, or I'm sure everybody gets TV coverage.
And you have, of course, the first responders seems like constant training for these events that happen, whether flooding or whatever Mother Nature brings our way. And some communities have even sirens that go off when dangerous weather is on the way. But do we, as citizens, need to be a little more active in terms of being vigilant about the weather, and as you mentioned, whether it's a forecast on the radio or television, and pay closer attention?
Yes, sir. You know, first of all, I'll say this. Kanawha County is blessed. We have a lot of responders out here who are swiftwater, what's called operations trained, and swiftwater technicians. That's a high level of training. We have a lot of teams out there in the fire departments especially that we can call upon, and usually if we can have flooding here and still be able to send help to other counties. we do have warning systems. We have sirens throughout the county. They're not everywhere, and they're for outdoor warning. They're for like where people are going to be outside. And we do have, as I mentioned earlier, ways to get information. But we get kind of warned to death, so to speak. Flash flood warnings are pretty common, and it usually doesn't mean your house gets washed away. But we need to start paying attention, particularly in the night. And if the Weather Service tells us it's going to be a flash flood emergency or tells us we're going to get 5-6 inches of rain, that's the time to stay up and listen to the radio, or maybe if you're in a vulnerable area, to move out of the way for right now.
CW, we are out of time. We thank you for what you do for Kanawha County and other counties as well. And we appreciate your time today.
My pleasure, sir.
All right, that's CW Sigmund. I'm Rick Johnson. We're back in a moment on Inside West Virginia Politics. Welcome back to Inside West Virginia Politics. A new PEI plan has started for state employees in West Virginia with increases and higher deductibles and more. And Kelly Allen is here. She's the Executive Director of the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy. Welcome to Inside West Virginia Politics again. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Hey, let's begin with, and I had to look it up because I didn't know, PEIA. What do those letters stand for?
It is the Public Employees Insurance Agency, so the state employer health plan that covers state workers, school teachers and school staff, and some local government employees. So about 70,000 direct enrollees and about 250,000 once you account for their families and retired folks.
Now, is it all just state employees, or are there other county governments and city governments that also use it?
So school districts, school teachers and school staffs use them, and then some local governments buy into them. And with July 1st coming, that's the start of the state's new fiscal year and also the new plan year for PEIA. So this is the month that we're seeing those PEIA enrollees start to get hit with premium increases and actually higher deductibles and out-of-pocket costs. Starting to hit those paychecks now.
So it's not a surprise to many people who are employed in state government and are getting in the mail the PEIA notice. And what about a pay raise for state employees? That used to be what it was about. Well, we'll increase your coverage for your PEIA, and that way everything will be fine.
Yeah. So. Premium increases for health insurance aren't new. A lot of workers probably say, hey, I get hit with those every year. What's the big deal? But this is the first year, as you say, in a few years that public employees have not received a pay increase to offset those increased insurance costs. And we took a look at the new costs and found that annually that could cost a single person employee-only coverage upwards of couple $100 a year, all the way up to more than $1,000 for somebody with family coverage. And even more if you're looking at the folks that have to pay a spousal surcharge to cover their spouse on PEIA. Again, that has not been offset by a pay raise this year. So we decided to take a look at this analysis, how those increased healthcare costs match up with state income tax cuts. Because you might remember in 2023 when the state was passing what they touted as the steepest and deepest income tax cuts in state history, they also were enacting the sweeping PEIA legislation. It did a few things, but one thing it did was kind of codify these increases in health insurance costs for both employees and the state year over year. And at the time, then Governor Justice was asked, does this violate your promise to not do PEIA increases during your tenure as governor? And he said, hey, this is a pretty good trade-off, kind of implying that the tax cuts would be greater than the health insurance premium increases. And I think this year we're starting to see for the average PEIA enrollee, their health insurance cost increases this year, and then when you count a couple years in a row, are far greater than any benefit they got from the 3 rounds of tax cuts at this point.
So in essence, a pay cut.
Exactly. And at the other end, for the state, those hundreds of millions of dollars that we forfeited from the state budget to do these tax cuts are kind of driving the crisis that could result in a special session that because lawmakers are feeling the crunch of PEIA costs. Those tax cuts are also the reason that state employees didn't get a pay raise this year. So we're kind of seeing that at the time when those tax cuts were passed, Governor Justice and others said the state budget can stay flat indefinitely. unfortunately, but that's not how medical costs work. That's not how inflation works. So we're kind of seeing all of these pressures coming to bear. PEIA costs go up, but the state has less money to put in, and they're shifting a lot of those costs onto employees.
How does West Virginia match up with our neighboring states on this issue?
I think that's a really good question. We hear our current Governor Morrissey talk a lot about how West Virginia needs to be competitive with our neighboring states. And for a long time, we knew state employee pay, teacher pay is among the lowest in the country, and absolutely the lowest of our region, of all the states that we touch. But the deal has been, the implicit deal has been, pay is going to be pretty low, but you're going to have really good benefits through PEIA. And as we see pressures to potentially shift more PEIA costs onto workers or weaken those benefits, we risk violating that commitment, right? And that impacts people who are on PEIA, but it also impacts those of us who use state services every day, right? If you have a student in the public school system, if you rely on road and bridge maintenance to get to work, if you rely on any number of state services, if we make it harder to attract and retain state workers, teachers, local government employees, that's going to affect all of us.
Kelly, we're out of time. I wish we had more time. Can we direct viewers to a website where they could read more about your analysis?
Absolutely, wvpolicy.org.
PEIA.
Yes.
Kelly, thanks for being here. Appreciate it
you.
very much. We'll take a break and be right back on Inside West Virginia Politics. Welcome back to Inside West Virginia Politics. Sarah Davis, reporter for WOWK in Charleston, recently did a story on the new law in West Virginia that aims to change the way bad student behavior is addressed in classrooms around the Mountain State. Sarah, welcome to Inside West Virginia Politics.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's great to have you. And you did have an opportunity to speak with State Senator Amy Grady, who is also chairperson of the Senate Education Committee. So she has a teacher background that certainly helps in the process. What did you learn from her about this bill?
Yeah, so Senator Grady, like you said, is a teacher. She has that background. So she's been really on the front lines of this issue. And she talked about how really in the past 15, 20 years, she's seen a big difference in childhood behavior. And when kids come to school, they don't behave like they used to. And so teachers were feeling burnout. They didn't have the resources they needed. They didn't feel supported because they felt like there really wasn't any legislation in place to really take care of the issues. And so she wanted to do something about it.
And so they did.
Yeah.
And the actual bill has become a law. Governor Morrissey signed it. When did he sign it?
He signed it in April of this year.
And so it takes effect the new school year.
Yeah, it officially went into effect July 2nd.
So what do parents need to know, or grandparents who are raising children, or guardians, whomever is responsible for that child and that student in school, what do they need to know about this new law now?
Yeah, so for kindergarten through 6th grade, so elementary school students, they will be placed on a behavioral plan if they act out in class. And this is disorderly conduct, which means abusive, disruptive behavior, not just has a hard time paying attention, like things that are happening in the classroom that really throw off the entire day for the rest of the students and the teacher. And so they will be put on a behavioral plan that's really focused on emotional well-being, mental health well-being, so that way they can get the skills they need to re-enter the classroom. And then for 6th through 12th graders, if they act up in classrooms, since their schedule is a little bit different, they can be excluded from individual classes. And if that happens more than 3 times in 1 month, then they are recommended to go to an alternative learning program.
So this sounds like a very proactive way of handling the situation now. And the classroom then will be a better place for learning for all students.
Yeah, and that's what Senator Grady talked about. She talked about not just singling out the one student who's having a particularly bad day, but also what can we do for the other 19, I think is what she said, in the classroom that are there and they're ready to learn. Like how do we take care of it in a proactive way, like you said, but also still nurture the needs and the education of the rest of the students in the classroom.
So, as we said, this law is about being proactive with a student who is becoming a behavioral problem in the classroom, but it's, as I understand, it's trying to learn more about this particular student. What is causing this behavior? Sort of the deep dive into how can we help this student?
Yes, getting to the root of the problem is really what Grady is pushing for in this legislation, because we're talking about, kids that may have come from abusive homes, kids that may not have come with the skills that they need, like other kids might. And we don't know those things until we sit down with the student and a trusted counselor, social worker, or their parent or guardian to really talk about the root of the issue. So that way they can re-enter the classroom and not just continually have this behavior, because we're not fixing the root of the problem if we're just patching it up.
And one of the things missing, maybe some people are a little dismayed about this and others are not, they're pleased that corporal punishment is not part of the process.
Yes, it was talked about, I believe, maybe just like off the record, but it was never written down in any of the versions of the law. It was never something that they wanted to do.
And this is something that all 55 counties have to handle.
Yes, so it is in the hands of the counties, which she did talk about that not every county in West Virginia has alternative learning programs at this time. She said that if a county doesn't, they can borrow resources from a neighboring county, or they can work with governmental programs like social workers from the state. So if you want to have those people in the situation, they don't have to be necessarily the one issue to the school. It can be someone from the state. So that way every county can get the resources they need if they don't actually have them at the time.
All right, Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
that.
Yes.
That's Sarah Davis, and that's all the time we have for now on Inside West Virginia Politics. We'll see you next time.